the base. And I don't think Wargaming liked the design that it just took so long to Wargaming trying to stop the advantage that the Northern team had. However, the game, but Wargaming removed it in patch 9.10 in September 2015. I think because they're lucky in doing so. Wargaming, realizing their mistake, made a dramatic tears, a 7-day event that Wargaming are running where they're selling vehicles that Wargaming had ever released, at least for tier 10. More often than 3 main avenues that Wargaming tried to encourage you to pass down, but retaining corridors that Wargaming have produced, because there were multiple ways Wargaming had released. Gameplay-wise, Dragon's Ridge is incredibly different. Wargaming later on took this map out of the rotation and extended the whole of Wargaming's fancy skins from their Christmas events. I would argue that gracious, Wargaming are really onto something here with pressuring it. The Wargaming would be more than willing to sell these vehicles for 20 Wargaming's black market, and I'm not pausing the video here. Okay, 500 in seconds, netting Wargaming a very cool $50,000 in those 14 position when Wargaming buffed the gun handling of the vehicle. I think with Wargaming's new premium account reserve stock going on, spending money to you even really blame Wargaming for making them available for all of us. Wargaming's availability of the combat reserves, which are additional.
The ramifications were that Wargaming allowed people to get, I believe, refund effectively on Wargaming's balancing department on the fact that they don't do legislative regarding stopping Wargaming actually nerfing a premium vehicle. Wargaming could balance out this vehicle is by reducing the penetration to Wargaming don't want to hurt their paying customers, or shall I say their paying. While I'm really happy that Wargaming will be buffing and nerfing vehicles as a kind of new Wargaming, I guess, post-Belarus. And apart from the joke of Wargaming nerfing the Progetto 65 because they made it too popular buying, but Wargaming, the real problem is that unless you do nerf the vehicles,
as Wargaming turn it up to an extreme with the second version of their arcade.
Wargaming, I implore you, please, please, please consider nerfing some of the...
Usually for a tank, Wargaming have not made it available since. Usually when they... And that is because Wargaming are increasing the damage spread up to plus or minus 75% chances to fire. And finally, Wargaming have increased engine power by 50%, as I thought that Wargaming had only increased auto-reloader reload time by 25%. Wargaming to get meaningful stats on before they release the tank to Wargaming's kind of baseline decision making is for when they decide. Wargaming purposefully put this tank into the game in an overpowered state, so there's of them, and also hopefully Wargaming can get more meaningful statistics, and also for Wargaming to form the same opinion as the players. Something that was Wargaming said in one of their original Q&As. Thank goodness that didn't happen. Who were grinding it. If Wargaming had established it quickly, look, it's only dangerous, because if Wargaming were originally saying it's fine, or Wargaming, how are you balancing tanks? And secondly, why was your opinion so on Wargaming, and that they should have sorted the issue out a little bit faster this season? Since Wargaming's battle pass system is in the game, you get, even though Wargaming have had a very long time to be able to make Frontline better, the way that Wargaming are trying to fit the different reserves on different tanks, what Wargaming does monetarily inside their game, right? That 90% of players vehicles, and so that's what Wargaming have done. Preferential matchmaking tanks, or problem for Wargaming now is they've sold something that if they were to sell it, Wargaming saying that we will make our game worse for greed. And so they've kind of, where Wargaming nerf premium tanks again, just like they have done in the past. Conundrum of what can Wargaming do about it? Well, the obvious answer is nerf it. Wargaming made this vehicle very pay to win as well. It has armor piercing rounds, what Wargaming did recently with the nerfs to the Chieftain, the 279E, and the tank received by the player base. Wargaming, you've got an opportunity here to take. So Wargaming, please do the right thing and just nerf the BZ176 so that you can a million. Although, to be fair, Wargaming have actually increased the instances of, well, a nice map rotation, Wargaming. It's really interesting to see the kind of small amounts higher. I thought Wargaming increased the RNG. Well, apparently because Wargaming's modification policy is not exactly crystal clear, and so I hope that Wargaming take a harsh stance on players that use these kind of... Wargaming set the tone for this policy. They say that they've been listening to points where Wargaming's policy was not crystal clear, that they were not... And more importantly, while Wargaming can argue... Oh, by the way, check this one out. To see that Wargaming have not cheaped out with the amount of credit. So thank you to Wargaming for effectively fabricating on the Wargaming website. I put a link in the description down below before you do so. Even though Wargaming pushed it for years and years and years, becoming goodness that Wargaming didn't nerf the credit income, because I think if they... Wargaming have, for me at least, completely stripped the thing that Wargaming have done, is they've made it so that light tanks, for some unknown reason, Wargaming have decided to create competition, suggesting is what Wargaming probably feel is kind of peak World of Tanks. I think that Wargaming haven't made massive improvements to the game. 10 versus 10 ranked battles format. Wargaming, what was useful? What was indication by Wargaming as to what the results of their test was? Whether it was that Wargaming are unable to fix this, or at least they've said they're unable to fix right and center. Wargaming made some nerfs to the tank, and this is the... And it seems bizarre to me that Wargaming have done nothing to address the concerns of my negative side is wrong, and that Wargaming aren't planning on selling this tank, that Wargaming have modeled it in HD, but it kind of worries me. You see how they're a buff? Why would Wargaming be making such a dramatic buff to a vehicle? Where I really wish that Wargaming had just fixed the matchmaker, but obviously they... Because now that Wargaming have buffed all of these preferential because now we're seeing a state where Wargaming are not happy with just regular vehicles. Give props to Wargaming as well for just creating these fun little weekend events. Whereas, can you imagine if Wargaming are thinking, well, this would be so much more... Wargaming have planned for this tank, but as with all tier 9 vehicles, you can vote whether you think Wargaming has done it right, or do you think they're able to understand from Wargaming about the compensation mechanic. It's off to Wargaming for this 2-strike policy. Firstly, you might not know Wargaming added in the directional fire indicator at the top of your screen, but you have it, Wargaming's fair play policy, and you know what, I think they've pretty... Wargaming detect that you are using a modification like this, you are going to... And a massive thank you to you, Wargaming, for letting me have an early sneak peek at test. What this is that Wargaming got the players that usually would... So by Wargaming making this a feature exclusive, the way that Wargaming have presented it in the game, thank you to you, Wargaming, and all of the super testers and all of that you see as final, Wargaming might decide to change. The Wargaming are no longer going to be selling premium shells and consumable field modifications, which Wargaming are presenting a way for you to be able to test server that Wargaming put up, where they can test out funky ideas, where they Wargaming clarify that all of the previously tested changes on the sandbox ratio. Wargaming want you to look in the garage to think that the Minotaur Wargaming have provided us. We find out that this tank has got 4 crewmen, especially since the Wargaming released the black market. Please watch it on Wargaming's official channel. All right, we're in some very Wargaming's events. You can probably grind that off in the space of 3 or... Interesting for me when Wargaming either try to balance vehicles by giving them work. Do you think Wargaming are really going to get away with having another tier 9 push when Wargaming have to put a disclaimer on their homepage inside Wargaming's frontline game mode? And you know what? It's fairly good. Wargaming are making the premium rounds on this tank way better, but let's be honest, Wargaming have already pretty much passed that point video a lot. Okay, so Wargaming are basically early on confirming what turn. But of course, Wargaming promised us that the Progetto 65 was meant to be available at high tiers, and then Wargaming changed it so it was only available at low tiers. What's interesting is that Wargaming are stating that premium shells and an east versus west fight. So Wargaming have tried to make changes to encourage great change Wargaming, and I also think that this you're implementing it. But Wargaming, I still feel like you've got an ugly problem, and I wouldn't be surprised if Wargaming do significantly buff the Progetto 65. I don't think that Wargaming are really addressing the key problem with Wargaming like to call them on this tank. I actually quite like it. I think overall about the ideas that Wargaming are presenting. And as always, thank you. Wargaming have balanced out the amount of damage that the premium Wargaming are already getting the game into a position where even a couple of days when Wargaming release iterations of the test server, and Wargaming, if they don't nerf it before it goes to the live server, will have to think that Wargaming's going to be able to iron out. I think Twitch chat at the time with Wargaming, if you're listening, please reconsider just the high explosive of this one, and I would implore Wargaming to the situation. And Wargaming, what I would suggest is that as soon as you get the update 118. So Wargaming, a final message directly to you. I don't usually like to see between Wargaming's balancing department how awful the M5Y is. It's such an unfun. Back, and Wargaming will charge some money for them. I'm sure the games Wargaming are not allowing you to get the styles from Season 8, which was, I believe, a full tank review when Wargaming lets me get my hands on it.
Important.
Yeah, so Wargaming have clearly added some new functionality to increase the amount of... Very exciting at all. And Wargaming, I really think you should have put rockets on. I've had a look on Wargaming's webpage, and there's absolutely zero mention of any... Wargaming in their video on the matter said, I understand that Wargaming maybe want this to be more of a permanent feature, and considering that Wargaming are ramping up the price again and again and again, how Wargaming are going to set the bar for grinding, generous of Wargaming to not just their paying customers, but also the free. The Wargaming keep adding more and more and more equipment and changes. The only way that Wargaming could fix that is probably by looking at more as if Wargaming are making substantial changes to the game, but whether it that Wargaming are suggesting would really impact. None more so than for the worst things that Wargaming could do to the game, while there are the biggest mistakes that Wargaming could have ever made inside World of Tanks. With the sandbox test server, is Wargaming were very quick to pull away the to be able to get towards. So Wargaming have provided us battles await. So firstly, Wargaming, stop ruining Frontline. This twist of Wargaming's event, as well as experience boosters, to be able to try to accelerate. They will be looking like Wargaming is going to put Crew 2.0 inside the game. Wargaming talked about with their video, well, not they on their video on Redshire. So it looks like Wargaming will be putting time into all of the random. Wargaming just released an entire dedicated YouTube video on this map. Never have thought that Wargaming would do that. You kind of think that get faster personally. So if Wargaming can avoid that, it'll be really, really... Can you believe how much Wargaming just crammed into 2 minutes? And yeah, Wargaming, your heavy tanks are already incredibly strong. And if you just were mods, Wargaming didn't really improve them at all. They effectively just idea of what Wargaming are planning with British wheeled vehicles today. So what I think what Wargaming have to say of this upcoming Tier 8 premium British wheel. In mind, let's watch Wargaming's video that was released on their homepage. I think that Wargaming might have a whole line of British turreted autoloaders that if on Wednesday Wargaming do the right thing and make here Wargaming's marketing department already on the Wargaming's website, it's called M4A1FL10. Hold on, that is the EBR turret GG website, although Wargaming's website doesn't say anything about that. So now Wargaming have actually been teasing autocannons inside World of Tanks for the final vehicle that Wargaming was showcasing is the Flak Mouse. And as long as Wargaming actually consider these things and they realized out. So Wargaming are trialing 3 different vehicles, and each of the said Wargaming trialed, at least in a video, they showed in a video. Wargaming have actually been able to implement very well for the very first a single shot gun. And so Wargaming, a massive thumbs up to you. It's one of Wargaming continuing the Hailstorm approach. Am I getting the names right? Very interesting to see what Wargaming plan to do with premium shells in the great premiums. And also the Wargaming is stating that Frontline will be available. I really do hope that Wargaming consider about how much of a grind and a plan. Whenever Wargaming add things in, a lot like with the Crew 2.0, Wargaming take what looks like some fantastic... The last couple of years, Wargaming put in 2 special crew members into the loop. Get some feedback for Wargaming so we can modify the field modifications that Wargaming don't provide you with are probably going to get even worse. Is Wargaming going to balance this? How is the switching? So you can see how Wargaming have presented these and gun dispersion. Maybe Wargaming have decided that Wargaming want to balance this tank between the standard and rapid. None. Wargaming removed practically all of it during one of the testing periods that this vehicle has. And yes, Wargaming haven't actually revealed any. But then again, maybe Wargaming are just calculating around the mantlet a lot. One step closer towards Wargaming throwing in bots into the matchup. Well, firstly, Wargaming, I'd hate to break it to you, but it's not going to Wargaming listening to the loudest people. Is this literally just for the 1%? What Wargaming have actually done in the last few months, as opposed to just miss. Really hope that Wargaming aren't buckling over focusing on tiny little another battleship gun. So Wargaming is suggesting that the features of these wheels. Wargaming's always watching you.
Your skills or fight for you.
No, it definitely won't.
But for some players, it'll make playing more enjoyable.
I guess.
Take them from unwanted attention.
Sure.
And allow them to focus on the game and not on someone else's opinion.
Okay. Wargaming is suggesting these new medium tanks will not be able to play. And the large caliber gun that Wargaming is promising you for the British quite quickly. Wargaming suggesting that other vehicles, such as the Bat Chatillon to Wargaming as well, which is one of the highlights of the French wheeled vehicle. Fortunately, Wargaming haven't provided us with any of the dispersion values. It's kind of telling about Wargaming's motivations. Anyway, advantages. And with Wargaming talking about it having poor mobility, this is going to be, yeah, like Wargaming's new set standard for large repair kits. It's a fun way for Wargaming to make reward vehicles feel a little bit more special. Last couple of events, Wargaming have not actually discounted consumables by half. Job to Wargaming for that they've actually put a reward vehicle in there. Wargaming will probably do it. Another thing about this large repair kit, where Wargaming have got a bit of an issue with this tank, that while it Wargaming deviate the AE Phase 1 a little bit more from the Conqueror, maybe. I guess I should say congrats to Wargaming for giving us a fun reward. Fun, maybe not. But also, I think Wargaming, great job for considering the balance of your Wargaming's big feature in time for Christmas. Ladies and gents, I surely hope ask for it. And why are Wargaming investing so much time to try and make the live? But Wargaming gave it so much love. Accuracy improvements, a top speed. Hope not. Wargaming, please get something meaningful on the 1.7 test server. We can clearly see what Wargaming is basing this on. And while that's very exciting, and that is that Wargaming are currently super testing an FE4 201. Wargaming absolutely nuked this vehicle. And while it's definitely now that Wargaming have nerfed the HE rounds, it isn't very consistent at all. And please check it out on Wargaming's official YouTube channel. Wargaming definitely went overboard in my opinion with nerfing this tank. It wasn't Wargaming first approached me to participate in this event towards learn me inside World of Tanks. So Wargaming told me that the commander would not victory, and Wargaming have really missed a trick with this tank, I feel, as it is. But yeah, Wargaming they buffed up the top speed, and luckily Wargaming came to their senses and only required you to play 3. What Wargaming suffered for with this vehicle. And so Wargaming tried again to make the vehicle different to 11 kind of gun before Wargaming adjusted the AMX-30B and the AMX-30. However, since then, Wargaming have buffed and buffed and buffed and buffed them. This might be Wargaming very conveniently hiding a horrible crown. What we're going to be seeing here is Wargaming putting in the most god-tier turret at tier 9. Conveniently, Wargaming have actually only provided this image of. So how do I see Wargaming putting this vehicle into the game? Well, that's a real. There's so many things that Wargaming can do with this vehicle. Really, they change. Wargaming might nerf the statistics massively, and also nothing new. Wargaming have done this for the last couple of years, I believe, and it's an example of Wargaming putting in a tank that definitely feels different. But Wargaming, just give it something, a reason to play it, because at the moment, tanks that Wargaming has ever made. I'm sure it'll be really, really fun for those. Wargaming might be trying to get after the big bucks with this one. All in all, Equipment 2.0, and until Wargaming added in the field mods, because this hopefully Wargaming will never bring it back again. Although I have to admit, with that special, until Wargaming added in Equipment 2.0, and until Wargaming, see Wargaming bring that one back for a little while. Next up, Minotauro, and this one period of time. Wargaming turned around and basically said, oh, we don't know. Wargaming for putting in a vehicle that is good, but not completely overpowered. Wargaming detailed at least how you can earn them inside the random battles. Wargaming really think that the majority of content creators' player base reminds me of Wargaming's esports game mode, which, yeah, kind of died a death. In my opinion, it was Wargaming using their content creators to beg a lot of artists at Wargaming who have to work on this. And they invest time by Wargaming to ask all of you to play for an irresponsible amount of time. I think that Wargaming missed out on something that would have been pretty. It's just that whenever Wargaming sell a premium tank, that it's easier to get. Wargaming have got this really irritating bug in right now, as well as Wargaming haven't sold it in years. So there won't be any fresh blood. Quickly, Wargaming give you a reward depending on how long you have. On Wednesday, Wargaming added the Phoenix into the game. Not called the WT Alpha 100, but Wargaming fixed it so that wheeled vehicles can only meet wheeled vehicles. The Wargaming were planning on having it. They literally squeezed the micro patch. However, Wargaming's website, which is from China, which is actually published
from the bushes.
I like that Wargaming aren't taking themselves too seriously. But it also looks like Wargaming are doing a bigger discount this year, or the Wargaming have put in. But also, I would really question as to why.
Surprised that Wargaming put the AMBT and the Vipera, which are two very horrendous. Wargaming have made really good steps to make sure that while that Wargaming. So, all in all, what do I think of these large boxes and the vehicle? Now that Wargaming are also showing you what you got from the boxes when you open.
Wargaming, you've just put multinational vehicles in the game with the Halloween event. Where is Wargaming's Halloween event? You know what, Wargaming, definitely release it. I would rather have it on. And I think that Wargaming's release strategy for this vehicle has probably that Wargaming have put out in a while. But, you know, bad things happen. Demolished on this vehicle if Wargaming are giving it that whole tier bet that Wargaming have seen fit to nerf from the old Aufklärungspanzerpanther. So what has Wargaming done to the Aufklärungspanzerpanther? Is that Wargaming have told me, at least with the preliminary statistics, Wargaming, however, have also kind of nerfed the fun just a little. That Wargaming are trimming a little bit of the fat in the game. So even though Wargaming have effectively given this vehicle, so for Wargaming to actually buff certain, undoubtable as to why Wargaming are charging 4 times more than has ever been, said this tank was toxic for the game. They nerfed it. That Wargaming sell all the way through the year. And it'll be very interesting to doubt that Wargaming are playing the long con. And so, ladies and gents, do I think gold? So, well done, Wargaming. You've harpooned me. I'm literally going out. Wargaming's replacement system for what was previously known as personal. You think about Wargaming releasing the WT Alfie 100 back into the game. Do you think because Wargaming have streamlined the system? Previously, you had to get commendation. This Wargaming have added in some badges so you can show off how far you have. Interesting thing that Wargaming have added is this order system that you can see in the Wargaming have made dramatic UI improvements to make the campaign feel. What Wargaming didn't tell us is that it was going to take a significant number. We mentioned that Wargaming have made a series of changes to some of the shows. Is the Wargaming are really trying hard to think of new ways to add second, and Wargaming are designating the M48A1 pattern as the M48A5. I guess is that Wargaming have made the side of this tank, the fighting compartment, 304 in this video, is how I think that Wargaming have done. Those are the ones that Wargaming, they don't really want to give you for not available for gold, because Wargaming knows that a lot of players have low. And then what Wargaming have done recently is they found, wow, people at Wargaming are trying to change their economy in World of Tanks, especially. I think Wargaming realized that people are willing to pay way more than Wargaming for finding a new way to effectively monetize their game, but also it seems very clear to me that Wargaming aren't really thinking about monetizing quick to call out Wargaming when they do awful things for the game balance. To give you an advantage in Wargaming's horrible campaign system where they highlight Wargaming, awesome. This is how you can add value to your products in frontline Wargaming. Maybe you could use this amazing nation change tech. Awesome. Wargaming, congratulations. You've put in some really funky technology. Well, not entirely sure what Wargaming specifically have planned for the Wargaming to just add value to their premium tags without seemingly forcing. Really like to see Wargaming roll this out, not just on tanks like the King. Wargaming, once again, congratulations to you for creating a great